This episode of Tudor, I Hardly Know Her is brought to you by VinylMePlease.com. Every month, get exclusive vinyls specially made for Vinyl Me Please with exclusive artwork, lyric books, and even cocktail recipes delivered right to your door. To sign up, go to joinvmp.com/Tudor. That's joinvmp.com/Tudor.
Hello, and welcome to another great episode of Tudor, I Hardly Know Her. Today is a little bit of a different episode because it is just me today. Unfortunately, Garrett and Jeffrey could not join us. Jeff is keeping earning his keep at the house by doing my laundry. Make sure you fold that. Yeah, fold it. Thank you. And Garrett is off ruling the radio world. But that's okay because today I have a little bit of a special episode for our listeners. I will pause after I make a really funny joke so that you may laugh. This is one such moment. Now you laugh. Then I feel good about myself and I keep doing the podcast. Thanks. So, as you guys probably know by now, just because I won't shut up about it, I read a lot. So I thought it'd be a really cool episode to talk about books. My favorite Tudor books. And actually there's one book I want to rail against because it's awful. But I thought I would just break it down and actually give you guys a list of some of the books I've read and the ones I really loved and tell you what they're about. You ready? Are you ready? Are you sure? Are you positive? Okay, y'all are ready. So, I figured we'd start in a chronological order. So, the first book I have to recommend to you is called Blood Sisters. It's by Sarah Gristwood. I'm pretty sure I've talked about this one before. It is such a fantastic book. It talks about the women of the Wars of the Roses and how the choices of their spouses and brothers and sons impacted their lives. So you, of course, see Margaret, Henry Tudor's mother, and then you also learn about how Cecily of York was affected and Elizabeth Woodville. And it's strange because when you're reading this book, they're actually talking about the connections these women have to each other. And then they have to betray one another because their husband decides, hey, I want to wear the crown now. It is a nonfiction book. It is one of the best ones I've ever read. I highly recommend it to everybody. I powered through it. I read it so quickly. I can't remember where I got it. I think I might have gotten it at Half Price Books. So shameless plug. But I'm betting you can also get it on Amazon. If it's a little bit more, you guys should absolutely get it. It's amazing. Book one. Next book I'd recommend is called Sister Queens. It's by Julia Fox, and I really like the author Julia Fox. She's written a couple of books that I also loved. And Sister Queens talks about the relationship between Catherine of Aragon and her sister Juana the Mad. So this is a cool opportunity for me to talk about Juana because we've never brought her up before. So man, I want to do a whole episode about Catherine of Aragon right now. I know I already have one, but I need to recap. So Catherine of Aragon is the daughter of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. So that's damn good coffee. That one's for you, Garrett. So they together ruled Spain. They kind of united the country, but not quite because they each had Isabel and Ferdinand each had power over their respective areas. So Ferdinand wasn't allowed to make laws for Castile and vice versa. They had a bevy of children, but unfortunately their sons died. So ultimately Juana ended up becoming the queen of Spain. But the awkward part is she was married to a man. Let me think about how to explain this. Okay, so Juana became the Queen of Castile after Isabel died. It couldn't go to Ferdinand. That title couldn't go to Ferdinand, so it went to their daughter Juana, who is the eldest. She is pretty much known as the Mad Queen, and that's because it's claimed that when her beloved husband died, she carried his corpse around with her, which is pretty much she might have gone with the corpse to wherever it was buried, but it really comes down to she was ultimately locked in the tower, and her father played a huge role in that. So the men in her life did everything they could to make it seem like she was actually insane so that they could really do the ruling. I'm just going to do a quick search because I know there was a woman, or I know there was a man involved in her life who, okay, so Juana, Joanna, you can call her many different things. So she remained the legal Queen of Castile throughout her life, but her father was the regent, and then her son Charles ended up, after Ferdinand died, her son Charles ruled as her co-monarch, but also he kept her locked in the tower. So it was her son and her father who were doing everything they could to lock her in the tower. But it also talks about Catherine. So it talks about the completely different lives these women led, and it's really interesting to see how when Catherine of Aragon's life was getting really bad with Arthur's death and then being left basically destitute in England and her father abandoned her, let's all agree Ferdinand was a dick. But Juana's life was all right. You know, she had children, she had a husband she loved. And then things kind of switched when Catherine married Henry, and then Juana was locked away. So it was a really interesting book. Julia Fox is such an amazing author. She brings these people to life in a really, really amazing way. And if you're wondering if you've heard that name before, you have. It's because Julia Fox wrote the book Jane Boleyn, The True Story of the Infamous Lady Rochford. I got Sister Queens in a contest on a Facebook page, and because I follow so many, I can't actually remember which Facebook page, but contests are pretty common on any Tudor fan page. So go and check out anyone. Just type Tudor in your search bar and you'll find one. So I recently finished another book just called The Tudors. It's by J.G. Myers. And this one was a little bit slower. I got it as a Christmas gift from a good friend of mine. And I don't think I finished it until like May. And if anybody knows me, they know that's really a long, long time for me to be reading a book. We were on vacation last week, I finished one book in like 4 days. I'm a very fast reader. This was a good book, but it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. It's kind of difficult to just pick up and power through. And I don't think that's any fault of the writers, because I thought it was really interesting and very factual. If you read a lot of books, there are just some that are not very fast, and that's okay. But it was a really great book, and it talked about, like, when you think of the Tudors, so many people think of just Henry and Elizabeth, but this talks about everybody from Henry VII to then Henry VIII, and then Edward, and then Mary, and then Elizabeth. And what I really found interesting was when I finished the book, it was obviously at Elizabeth, and it seems like the author really doesn't like Queen Elizabeth. Like, I'd totally guess he was a Catholic if he was from that time period, he or she. I actually don't know if the author is a man or a woman. But, this author spent a good chunk of the Elizabeth time talking about how, like, oh, everybody remembers Elizabeth as this great, powerful queen, but really she didn't do that much. And he just kind of ripped apart some of what he claims were myths about her. So, like, the Armada thing, he basically was like, chance is really what made that work out for her. She got lucky. So I'm not sure what that was all about. I want to actually read some other Elizabeth books because I want to see if this was just this one author's point of view on Elizabeth, or if maybe this is becoming a new scholarly idea of her, kind of like how Anne Boleyn went through those phases of like, well, first she was the whore who was beheaded appropriately, and then she was the victim, and then she was this woman who slept with her brother. Like, they go through these waves of she's this, no, she's this, no, she's this. So now I'm wondering if we're approaching an Elizabeth wave just because of what this author was saying. So I got to find some more stuff by about Elizabeth, not by J.G. Myers. I want to find something else. So if you guys have a good Queen Elizabeth book that's not by Alison Weir, because I already have a ton of those, and if it's recently published, let me know because I need to check that out. So I'm just going through the nonfiction books right now, so I'm kind of skipping a lot of the more well-known ones by like Philippa Gregory and Alison Weir, but I will get to those in a little bit. I read a book called Catherine Howard, A New History, and that was by Connor Byrne, and I got that on my Kindle from the Amazon store, and I read that one really quickly as well. And what I really liked about that book is they start with the whole Catherine was a dumb slut who got what she deserved. Except this book really breaks down how weak women were in that time period. And I know that's weird to say when, you know, we have Anne Boleyn and Queen Elizabeth and Catherine of Aragon, like these really strong, powerful women, but they're almost remembered because they're anomalies in that time period. So it is weird to say that women weren't powerful, but it's true. And the Connor Byrne actually almost points out that it's like they are feared, and it almost goes back to the biblical stuff with, you know, Eve was the one who damned us all by biting into that apple. It's her fault. But you know, there's also witchcraft. They feared people. They, like, women were accused of being witches simply because men wanted to have sex with them. Look at what happened to Anne Boleyn. So then it also points out the politics of the court at the time Catherine Howard was basically shoved under Henry's nose. It was the Howard family again, which if you remember, that's Anne Boleyn's uncle. Like, Uncle Howard, he kind of sucked again. And there were two rivalries between the Howards and then the other family, and I can't remember their name off the top of my head, for which I apologize. But, you know, Catherine was almost a victim because she put the Howards in charge by becoming queen, and the other family didn't like that. So they would do what they could to tarnish her reputation. So it is agreed generally that Catherine actually did sleep with Thomas Culpeper. There's no denying that. There is also, you know, it's known that she fooled around with Henry Mannix and with Francis Derham. We know those things happened. But was her beheading at the behest of this rival family? Because she could have just had the marriage annulled and been sent to a convent. I guess that's not in that time period, but she could have been sent away. So it really talks about how Catherine, she's naive, and I see her as a victim, and it's sad because she was just a 17-year-old girl, maybe 19 at the most, but you know, she almost grew up neglected. And this was one of those books, again, the name is Catherine Howard, A New History. This is one of those books that really makes you see her in a different way. And I like that because so many people focus on Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, and the other queens just kind of get lost. Their real life stories, the fact that these were real people. So I liked that this book brought them back to life as much as was possible. And actually there is another book called The Young, the Damned, and the Fair. Pretty sure that's the name. And The Young, the Damned, the Fair. And that one is by Gareth Russell. That is on my to read list, and it is once again about Catherine Howard. Really excited to read it. I really like learning more about these women who I didn't know much about before, beyond like the kind of basics like online searches. I like seeing how they found these documents that talk about, the details of their lives and then additional information. So that was really cool. Oh, that reminds me. I forgot to say this about the book The Tudors. So one thing I thought was really cool was the way it was divided up, and it took me like a minute to figure out what was happening. So they would do a chapter on whatever that chapter's topic is, and then they would provide like a mini chapter of a couple of pages that provided the background information you needed to understand the importance of what was going on. So for example, when they were talking about how Henry VIII destroyed the, Jeff, what's it called? Where the monks lived? It's not a mortuary. It's not a shrine. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I can't remember the name, and I'm sure you all are shouting into your phones. What? I'm sure Garrett would know. God damn it, Garrett. Monastery. It's a monastery, Jeff. It's a monastery. Hooray. Got it. So anyway, when the book talks about Henry VIII destroying the monasteries, it actually talks about the history of the Roman Catholic Church in England and why that was so much, why that was so devastating for so many people in England. And I think I talked about this in past episodes, but it really provides you with a framework that you don't have without that information. So that's another reason I really loved that book. It's because it provided that kind of information that I think is super, super great. Okay, on to my favorite Tudor book. Jane Boleyn, The True Story of the Infamous Lady Rochford. Once again, Julia Fox. I know I've talked about it before. I gave the book away to one of our awesome listeners. By the way, please let me know how you like that book. I'm very curious if you love it as much as I did. So I don't even remember why I started reading this book. I think it was just because I was like, I've never read much about her. This book shows Jane Boleyn in a way you don't see her. So whenever she's written about in historical fiction or she's portrayed on TV, she's always this conniving bitch. She's always this horrible, tawdry, wanton woman who is just this evil, malevolent person. And the book, Julia Fox found information that shows her more as Anne Boleyn's friend than somebody who hated her. So if she was this friend, then she was obviously a decent enough person. And I know that she could have faked it, but let's remember this is Anne Boleyn and she was incredibly shrewd. So I don't think it'd be easy to fake liking her or fake being her friends. I think Anne would see through that. But it provides information like, for example, Jane Boleyn was at Anne's coronation, of course, because she was her sister-in-law, but she was given a place of honor behind Anne. There was no reason to do that. She could have put her sister behind her. She could have put somebody else behind her, but she chose Jane. And then there's the stuff like the fact that she even confided in Jane things about her marriage with Henry. Why would she do that unless they were friends? And then the biggest thing is, and I know I talked about this in the Boleyn episode, when George Boleyn was in court being told, hey, we know you banged your sister, they brought up evidence given by a woman. For some reason, that woman was assumed to be Jane Boleyn after the fact, not contemporarily, but after the fact. And there's no evidence that says it was her. So, then it also talks about how she got involved with Catherine Howard. She did facilitate Catherine Howard's affair. That's true. And I almost want to defend Jane because I'm like, she's your queen. You can't say no. You can try and steer her away from it, but she's your queen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You don't tell Henry no. You don't tell Catherine Howard no. So it's unfortunate. I don't know if she actually encouraged the affair, because I know that's been stated before. I am actually rereading this book right now. So once I refinish it, I will give an update about that. But either way, it shows Jane in a completely different light, and it offers supporting documents for that. It's not just like this, oh, what if she's a completely different person? No, here's statements about what she was doing and what money she was given and the presents she was given by Anne and Henry and all of this stuff. And it shows her as just as much of a victim as maybe not Anne Boleyn, but some of the other ladies in her court, definitely. Okay. So this is a fun little book I got. I just randomly picked it up in a Barnes & Noble. It's called The Time Traveler's Guide to Elizabethan England. And it's by Ian Mortimer. And I love it because it's broken down into little sections, so you can find out about everything. It's where I found out a lot about our health and medicine episode, and then the beauty episode. And it's really cool because it gives you this awesome opportunity to see exactly how people were living. You know, we get documentation about how like the royalty was living, but we don't know about how the people in London were living, or the people in the farms were living. So this one's cool. It's really fun to just flip through. You don't have to read it front to back, and I don't do that. I just kind of open it and find a section that I want to read, and I'll read it. So it's really cool for quick, digestible chunks of information. I really liked it. It's just such a fun, unique book, and it's a really great resource if you are ever like, I write a lot. I like to pretend one day I'll be a really cool author who writes historical fiction. So it's cool for resources like that. Now, of course, Elizabethan England is like 50 to 100 years different than like Henry VIII, but it still provides a lot of information because they actually talk about the differences in those time periods. So it's a fun little book, and I actually think that this author, Ian Mortimer, has a bunch of time traveler guides to different time periods, and I do want to check some of those out. I really like learning about the minutia of daily life, because, you know, we all talk about like, oh, it'd be so cool to go back in time and be in that time period. Most of us are picturing being in the court, but like, let's be honest, I would not be in the court. I'd probably be married to a merchant. God, I hope so. I really can't do a farm. So that one's a really, really fun one for that. Okay, so this last nonfiction book I'm going to recommend is called Sex with Kings. And it's not necessarily Tudor, but it is, Henry VIII obviously comes up because everybody had sex with him. So this book is by Eleanor Herman, and what I really love about it is that it talks about the mistresses of famous kings and what their lives were like. And you'd think Anne Boleyn would come up a lot, but she actually didn't. There was a lot of Diane de Poitiers that came up, and Madame Pompadour came up a lot, and it talked about the importance of being a mistress. So the maîtresse en titre, that's the main mistress, really, the only mistress. A king will offer that title to a woman, and he will keep her as his only mistress. Well, this book kind of breaks down the importance of that, because the queen was chosen for political reasons. Unless you're Henry VIII, your marriage is political. You may end up liking your queen. You may even end up loving your queen, but it's not a choice for you. The mistress is a choice. You get to choose whom you love and whom you get to set up in a powerful position. And ultimately, it ended up being a super powerful position. People would go to the mistress and treat her like a queen. She had her own title. She had her own mini court. She had her own nice apartments near the king. So it's really cool to get that perspective. And it talks about famous mistresses and non-famous mistresses throughout England or Europe. So lots of French mistresses, let's be serious. But of course, then there are the English ones and even Spanish ones, and then the other countries that we don't know a ton about. It was a really fun book. It was kind of funny to tell people I was reading a book called Sex with Kings, but I really, really enjoyed it. I think I got that one at Half Price Books, and I do highly recommend it. It's just a really fun book. It's fast too. It can be broken up into quick sections, and it doesn't necessarily have to be chronological. So you could flip it open and just pick a random chapter to start with. So I think that's it for my nonfiction books. Hey, Garrett, you know how I like books?
Yeah, you never shut up about them.
That's true. They're amazing. And you know what always frustrated me was that I was wasting valuable book reading time in a stupid 30-minute commute to and from work. That's an hour of booklessness that I could have remedied.
Don't be bookless, Emily.
Yeah, you want to know what I did? I got Audible. Audible is an amazing, amazing thing. I tried it out a couple years ago, and I have been hooked ever since. Once a month, I get a brand new audiobook. Occasionally, I get more if I decide I need more. But it's just such a great way to fit in an extra book in my life.
So what kind of books do you listen to, Emily?
I kind of listen to everything. I listen to history, biographies. I really like listening to crime novels on audiobooks, but they have everything. You can find almost any book on Audible. One of my favorites was I just finished Catherine of Aragon, The True Queen by Alison Weir. She's got her whole series coming out on audiobooks, and you can find it on Audible, guys. And you want to know what's even cooler?
What's cooler than that?
We can offer our listeners a free 30-day trial and get them hooked. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen to it on your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or any sort of MP3 player, including your Zune. I know you still have that.
You know, I was going to make a joke about the Zune, and then I was like, she's not going to mention the Zune. And then you mentioned the Zune.
Do I know you or what?
Too well.
If our listeners want to get a free 30-day trial of Audible, they can just go to audibletrial.com/tutor. Again, that's audibletrial.com/tutor, and you get a free 30-day trial and an audiobook. So check that out.
And yeah, like you think, audiobook, I can blow through this pretty quick. Audiobooks are super long. Like that's so much content that you're getting for that free trial.
It's wonderful. I'm obsessed with it.
It really is.
So if you love reading and you want to find a way to fit another book into your life, go to audible.com. Get a free trial, 180,000 titles, and you'll be happy.
Hey, Emily.
Hey, Garrett.
You know what I need?
What do you need?
I need some cool, nerdy swag for my desk. Like, my desk is completely barren. There's nothing cool here. Like, I need something good.
I have an idea. You should check out Loot Crate.
Loot Crate? What's that?
You get a big box of awesome, nerdy swag every month. It's a subscription-based service, and you can get a box of really awesome, nerdy things that will surprise you every month. It's a different theme, and you get exclusive loot, so things you won't find anywhere else.
I bet they're not going to have anything I like.
What do you like, Garrett?
Well, I'm into really niche, nerdy things like Marvel, DC... Star Trek, Star Wars,
surprisingly,
things that nobody really know about.
They have all of it. They've got Deadpool, Alien, Star Trek, Harry Potter, whatever your little nerdy heart desires, they have.
Okay, but how do I sign up for this little Loot Crate?
Well, all you have to do is go to trylootcrate.com/tutor. And you can even get exclusive savings by entering the promo code BRIDGE10 to save 10%.
I think I'll have to try and sign up for this Loot Crate.
I think that's a really great idea, Garrett.
Okay, one more time. What was that address?
Trylootcrate.com/tutor and enter the promo code BRIDGE10.
Well, all right. I think I'll go do that right now.
Please do.
Loot Crate, get it. Loot it, love it, buy it.
Now I want to move on to historical fiction because like most of us probably got started on that. I know when I was like in 7th grade, I wasn't like, I want to read a biography. Actually, my first Tudor book was The Other Boleyn Girl. And that definitely spurred my interest in the Tudors. The only thing I knew, I remember my mom reading it and saying I wasn't allowed to. And then, of course, I snuck it away from her. Sorry, Mom. But I remember her telling me like, oh, it's about Henry VIII. And I was like, oh yeah, that guy with 8 wives. Like for some reason I just, like people seem to think he had 8 wives. Maybe it's the Henry VIII, 8 wives. I don't know. But, I specifically remember reading the first couple pages and I was like, oh, well now I remember, or now I know I am not allowed to read this. But it did start my interest in that time period. I read a lot of Philippa Gregory books. My mom got them and then she'd lend them to me when she realized she wasn't going to be able to hide them from me. So coffee break. So it was really cool to start with those books. I think historical fiction is a great way to start because it's not overwhelming, especially when everybody's named Thomas, Henry, Anne, and Mary. So I really got to know a little bit about these people. Now, obviously, the more I learned, actually, the less I liked it. But like, I see books as a part of me. It's weird, but if I ever enjoyed a book, I will not get rid of it unless it's like destroyed. And even then sometimes I keep them. So like confession time, I still have my Twilight books from high school because when I was in high school, those books really like, I was not a fun kid. And that was the one thing that kind of made me really happy. So I won't get rid of them. I'm not going to like prop them on display and let everybody see them. But, that's how I feel about the Philippa Gregory books is that like I still have them and I actually still buy copies of some of them. I've stopped with some of the more recent ones just because she seems to be getting carried away with this curse. But, I always enjoyed the books and her books even recently were still a good gateway into learning about new time periods. So I actually think as recently as like 4 or 5 years ago, she got me interested in the Wars of the Roses. So I kind of started going backward. So, Philippa Gregory, if you have a friend who doesn't quite understand your obsession, give her one of their books. They're fun. They have enough historical accuracy to be of interest, but they're still like, they're fiction, they're novels, they're fun. So I would actually recommend somebody could start with like The Other Boleyn Girl or one of those books, The Lady of the Rivers even, and just tell them to take it with a grain of salt. Remember, not all of it's historically accurate, although Henry did have 6 wives. So that's the one I started with. That's the one I always liked. But I also, recently I've gotten into Alison Weir. I hope I say her name right. It might be Wire. She's British. Call the British guy. I got to get the British guy to tell me how to say this. So I really like Alison Weir's books, and I like that she does a healthy mix of nonfiction and fiction. So I have read a lot of her nonfiction books, and I really enjoy them. But some of her fiction books, I just like fly through. I devour them. I really love them. Some of my favorites have been Innocent Traitor, and that's about Jane Grey. Or Jane Grey's sister. She did 2, Innocent Traitor and A Dangerous Inheritance. Both of those are really great books, and I like books that give a little bit more perspective on people who aren't that known. So, like Jane Grey, she's the 9 Days Queen. We know a little bit of information about her, but she was a real person who led a real life, and she had really tragic consequences of her family's power tussle. So, I really liked Innocent Traitor. I thought that was a great one. And then, Alison Weir has also started writing, books recently, each focusing on the 6 queens. I think it's just called the 6 Queens series or the 6 Queens. I did the audiobook for Catherine of Aragon, the True Queen. And I liked the book a lot. I didn't like the narrator. She kind of ruined it for me. And the reason I didn't like it is because the narrator adopted this really blustery man's voice, and it's a woman, and instead of just slightly deepening her voice, she'd go, it almost sounded like Santa Claus. She'd be like, oh, this is the way you should. It was so weird. I can't even replicate it. So I got through that one. I really enjoyed the book. I just didn't like the narrator. So I use Audible, and I get a monthly credit. So there's some months where I'm like, shoot, I don't know what to get, but I really need an audiobook so I don't get road ragey. So couple months ago, I was like, I'll just get the Anne Boleyn one of that series. It's called, what is the Anne Boleyn one called? I don't remember, but she had an Anne Boleyn one out, and I decided to get it. Well, it had the same narrator, and I was talking to my husband, and I'm like, Jeff, I really want this book. I really want to read it. I've got my credit, but this narrator is driving me crazy. And he is all about audio quality, voices, all that stuff. And he knows how distracting bad voices can be. So, he suggested I just return it, which I did. And it stinks because I liked it. I just was not a fan of the audio reader. Now, I think I want to get the physical copy of it. It's interesting because I just started the Anne Boleyn one, and the only part I got to was when she was in the court of Margaret, and when she was really young, and she's a completely different person. She's a little more innocent. So I didn't get to see her evolve into who she's known as, so I wasn't sure where she was going with that. But in the Catherine of Aragon one, I got really frustrated with the Catherine character, and I do call her them characters in historical fiction because, yeah, she's a real historical figure, but I can't be sure how much is made up and how much was not. But I liked listening to that audiobook because it really gave me a perspective of like, oh my God, Catherine is so stubborn. Like, do you not understand what you're doing right now? And she would just be, it would have been naive, and like I get why she was a really strong, powerful woman and people loved her and respected her for that. But, and I don't think she necessarily should have given in to Henry's demands, but you mostly saw it from like the frustrated perspective. So like Wolsey and Henry and Anne, you could see how they would get angry with her. And it was mostly just because she was stubborn and wouldn't give in any way, shape, or form at all. And then she'd acknowledge that she knew she was ruining a lot. And she's like, but I don't care. I'm queen. So it kind of became frustrating. And I weirdly liked that because everybody's so used to having sympathy for Queen Catherine, which I absolutely do. But I liked it because it showed like you can still have sympathy for someone and also be incredibly frustrated with them. So that one was called Catherine of Aragon, the True Queen. Once again, Alison Weir. I can't recommend Alison Weir enough. Everybody should give one of her books a shot. Do nonfiction, fiction, whatever. I have like 10 of her books that I haven't yet read, and I plan to. Okay, so now we're going to get into super fiction. It's called there's a 3-part series. There's The Boleyn King, The Boleyn Deceit, and The Boleyn Reckoning. And this is by Laura Anderson. And I don't remember. I think I just picked it up from the Kindle library just for something to read. And I ended up going through it. And it is a what if history. So what if Anne Boleyn had actually given birth to that child she miscarried in January of 1536. So it talks about how life would have been. It really picks up right after Henry VIII died. Well, it picks up a couple years after Henry VIII died. So they have a son. He's known as Henry IX, but everybody calls him William. He still has his older sister Elizabeth, and I kind of like the story because it really goes into how would people have viewed Anne Boleyn if she'd had a son, if she'd given the heir that was needed, and also what would have happened to Mary and what would have happened to Elizabeth, because Mary still would have existed regardless. So they're a really fun read. I really enjoyed them. They got a little crazy at some points, but everybody needs those kind of books where they're just a little bit goofy but still fun to read. So I did like those books. I actually didn't read the third one until this past summer, and I started them years ago. So I think I just read the first two, and then the third one wasn't out by the time I finished them, and so I forgot. But I did really like those ones. They were fun. So, okay, now we're going to go on to a book. Okay, this one's called Ambition's Queen, and I almost don't want to tell you the author because I'd feel bad. Let me tell you, I hated that book so freaking much. It was terrible. So this whole book's angle was you learn about Anne Boleyn's downfall through the eyes of her maid. And it pissed me off because, oh God, it's a whole series and I don't even remember. Like, oh God, it's so bad, guys. Okay, so the whole point is that this maid gets to see a lot that that nobody else would have seen. I'm actually going to read you guys my review from Goodreads. I posted this in 2014. So the review is, so I gave it 1 star and I said, I truly regret reading this book. I'm a huge fan of most Tudor-related novels, and I figured seeing Anne's downfall from the perspective of a nearly invisible maid would be interesting, but it was just awful. The characters were shallow, everything was incredibly repetitive and yet inconsistent, and there was nothing new or exciting about the way the story was told. So what I specifically remember is this author was like obsessed with describing clothes, like weirdly obsessed. Every time somebody walked into a room, the first thing that would be described is every little bit about the clothes they're wearing. And it almost got like, look how many color words I know, and look how many different materials I know, and I really know about how these clothes were put on. So drove me mad. And then she just described, like, whenever baby Elizabeth came into the picture, she was described the exact same way every single time. Like, it's like she just copied and pasted this description over and over and over again. And then she's like throwing out random ass facts. Like, she's like, ugh. Okay, here's one thing that really bothered me. At one point, Anne Boleyn is confiding to her freaking maid who sweeps the floor. It's not a maid like, lace up my dress. It's a maid like, I'm invisible and light your fire. It pissed me off that Anne Boleyn was confiding in her before her downfall. Maybe if she was in the tower, I get it. But then at one point, Anne Boleyn's like, we had a baby boy. What? Yeah, he lived for like a month or two. No, like I can't deal with that kind of falsification. Like, I know we don't know too much about Anne Boleyn's gynecological history. There may have been another miscarriage, but you can damn well know that some history would have been kept indicating Henry had finally had a son with Anne Boleyn. Like, that wouldn't just disappear. Even if Henry tried to make it disappear, there would have been announcements across Europe. There would have been everything. You can't erase that. So it really pissed me off. So I was just going through my Goodreads and I read that and I knew I had to throw in an Emily style rant. Don't read Ambition's Queen. It's a bad one. So I think that's it for the books I have to do with directly the Tudors. Of course, I read a ton of other history books, so I can also provide here and now a little bit of here's what I would suggest for non-Tudor but still history. I read a biography called Victoria the Queen, an intimate biography of the woman who ruled the world by Julia Baird, Baird. Loved that one, flew through it. It was amazing. There's a book called Marie Antoinette, The Journey by Antonia Fraser. I really liked her. That's the book that the movie with Kirsten Dunst was based off of. There's not as much pop rock in the book as in the movie, but it's still good. Okay. Really like the Outlander series. At least the first 4 books. I had to stop reading the 5th one. It was just too much. Okay, Dan Jones, History Bay. read Dan Jones. Okay, so he's got 2 books that might be of interest to our listeners. One is called The Plantagenets, The Warrior Kings and Queens Who Made England. And then another is called The Wars of the Roses, The Fall of the Plantagenets and the Rise of the Tudors. The first one is so long because the Plantagenets ruled for freaking ever. But it's still a good informational book, but it's one of those marathon, not a sprint books. So get that one, enjoy it. There's also the Wars of the Roses one, same Dan Jones. That one is, for some reason, same author, but I enjoyed it so much more. Not that I disliked the Plantagenets, I just really enjoyed the Wars of the Roses. So this talks about what actually happened that made it possible for Henry VII to come to the throne. It's amazing when you think about it. So loved that one. Highly, highly recommend it. Please read it. If you can only read one of those 2 books, do The Wars of the Roses. It's amazing. Sister. So the Julia Fox book is called Sister Queens, The Noble, Tragic Lives of Catherine of Aragon and, hold on, it got cut off, Juana, Queen of Castile. So that's the sisters one. Don't read him. There's another little book called The Pleasure Palace, and it's The Secrets of the Tudor Court. I didn't enjoy that one. I remember not loving it very much. It was kind of weird and goofy. My gosh, I read a lot of Marie Antoinette books. I think that's it for me for historical books. I mean, follow me on Goodreads and you can still see all the things I've read, and I rate them. So I still have ones for you. So I think that's it. I would love your guys' book recommendations, though. I know there are so many that are out there that I haven't yet read. So if you've read one or somebody recommended one to you that you think I'd love, send it my way. What I'd really like to do is I'm reading one of the billions of books I'm currently reading is about the Tudor Brandons. So Charles and his wife Mary, Queen of France. And what I'd like to do is do a mini episode after I finish it that kind of summarizes and reviews the book. So if you recommend one to me and I read it and review it, then I will definitely call you out on the podcast because you're awesome and I love you for supporting my book addiction. Also, if you disagree with me on anything, like if you think The Other Boleyn Girl was trash and nobody should ever touch it except to burn it, let me know. Tell me I'm wrong. And I think that's it for now. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm going to try and get better about Twitter. I know I'm on it enough, but I want to be on it more. Our Twitter page is just at Tudor Know Her. And on Facebook, of course, you can follow us, and it's Tudor I Hardly Know Her. So I post different things on both of those, so follow me there, and we will have a grand old time. Send me recommendations, talk to me, tell me what I got wrong, tell me what you love. Let us know what your favorite episodes have been. We are really curious about what you guys have loved, what you hated. So if there's one episode that just drove you mad, maybe it's this one, let me know. I want to know. I want to get better. And I think that's it. So until next time, divorce beheaded died, divorce beheaded survived. Goodbye.